let's talk about the Flying Fiddles palette from Adept Cosmetics. Beautiful packaging as always. This is Adept's take on creating a neutral palette to add to their product lineup. They said people have been asking for one, and I definitely think it's always great to have a variety of color stories. So you definitely want to have a bright colorful color story, maybe a pastel palette, maybe monochromatic palettes, and then of course you gotta have a neutral palette. So I'm very excited to see this from Adept Cosmetics. I know they had a palette that was kind of a neutral palette previously. I don't believe that one is available anymore. I might be wrong, but I don't have that one. And I did purchase this palette, and I do have a affiliate code with Adept Cosmetics, which I will put up on the screen in case you're interested in this palette or anything else. And thank you so much if you do use my code. So this feels like real lace, and I really love the simplicity overall that Adept Cosmetics has with their packaging. I really feel like they found their vibe with their packaging for sure. It does feel a little bit luxe, and thus is also reflected partially in the eyeshadow palette. So there are 4 mattes, there are 4 duochromes, and then there is 1 multichrome and 6 shimmers. And this palette is 62 doll hairs, and it is because there is only 1 multichrome shade in here, which is the shade Dahlia. They do not have descriptions of each of the shades on the website, but I will be taking you through each of the shade individually and showing you how they swatch, as well as showing you the entire palette swatches all together, so you get a vibe for really what you're gonna get. There is a tie-dye shade in the center. They have done that previously. I believe it was the Seahorse palette that also had a shade like that in here, and I did already swatch it because I did take pictures. This one ends up kind of turning into this like greenish bluish brown. And obviously it's going to depend on the shade because there's going to be probably different levels of each of the colors in this pan. So you might get different levels of what the swirl ends up looking like. And they do have that noted in the description on their website. None of these shades are super flaky. Like for example, the Minka palette. These are all pretty much on the very much smooth side, but they have quite a bit of sparkle. They are really special in their own way. So even though it's not jam-packed full of multichromes, you do have some really beautiful shimmers to choose from. And there's no squishy or sticky shadows in this palette, which I was so excited when I was swatching it, and I was like, you know what? I just realized I don't think any of these feels like really squishy or oily or even sticky to the touch like in the Cimmerian Sunset palette, which I do have a dedicated video up on. I was really disappointed. It's just the really emollient formulas in there. I do have hooded oily lids, so I just knew that those were not going to work for me, especially if I was going to use them on the lid. I would really have to be particular. So I'm excited because this means I can use this entire palette anywhere on the lids that I can, because none of these are going to be creasy whatsoever. So let's get right into all the details. I'll be showing you how I created these 2 looks, and I'll give you some of my thoughts at the end of the video. Super smooth. It's like a pink to orange to yellow and to a lime green, like really at a harsh angle with like a really bright light. But this one is so smooth, the smoothest out of all the shades. It's a little bit more metallic versus sparkly. It does remind me of some other shades I've seen before, like Toucana from Devinah, for example. Meadow Foam is a brown shimmer shade with tons of different sparkles throughout it. It is very beautiful. It's smooth, but you can see it's really got that sparkle to it. Next is Erythema, and this one is such an interesting shade. I believe this is one of the duochromes, as it does have a little bit of a yellowy shift. But this one's like a almost yellowish pale gold with tons of pink flecks throughout it. It almost looks a little more pinky in certain light. It's a very dimensional shade. Daffodil is a very pale yellowish green. Very sparkly. Definitely on the sheer side if you wanted to build this one up, or if you just wanted it to be very subtle. Great one and done shade for sure. Viola Bronze, and this one obviously a little bronze, but I would say it has quite a bit of orange in it. And lots of sparkles throughout it as well. Very dimensional shade, very beautiful, easy shade to pair with Sahara, especially tone-wise. I think would be really nice. I believe this one's also a duochrome, since it does have a little bit of that really bright orangey yellowy shift. Scorpion Grass, this is the tie-dye shade. It's a very greenish blue with like a little bit of beige in it. I really feel like this one's going to depend on just how much you push down and how much you swirl your finger. And I feel like you might get slightly different shade every time as well. It does shift maybe a little bit to blue, but it is pretty much a greenish, neutralish shade. I feel like the first time I swatched it, it was much more brown. and now it looks more green. Pompon button. This is the darkest shimmer in here. Quite a bit of a black base to it. I think you could see it blended out on the edges there. This is a very sparkly forest green, and this one does feel to the touch a little bit different from the rest of the shades. It feels a bit more harder pressed, a little bit harder to pick up. Next up is a yellow Bronwyn. I feel like this one's actually pretty shifty. Definitely a duochrome, maybe even a multichrome, even though it is not called that on the website. This one is stunning straight on yellow, and it has almost like a pinkish brown base to it and a bluish teal shift. It's such a beautiful dimensional shade to have in here. Very, very sparkly. Honey Square is a very sparkly, very light champagne shade, very smooth. I think this one you could tap on very lightly to just get a very ethereal light wash. Great one and done shadow for sure. Blue Crown is a blue, purple, brown based duochrome shade. Super beautiful. I think this one's not maybe as sparkly as some of the shades in here, and I do think this one is pretty opaque. Rust Bunny, what a fun shade name. To the touch, this one feels a little bit different from the rest of the shades in here. It almost feels like slightly less harder pressed, so it picks up very easily, and it's very smooth. And it's got a really beautiful bright pink flash straight on. It has a grayish base, and then it sparkles throughout it, and it shifts all the way to orange, and then to orange, to yellow, and a really bright green. I think this is probably one of my favorite shades in here. I feel like this one's a multi-chrome. Priming with the Pat McGrath eyeshadow primer. Picking up Tan Toffee Rose, and I'm just gonna put that into the crease. Definitely seems to have stuck down a little bit. So it's just going to take a little bit of extra elbow grease to really blend this out. Definitely going to try a different primer on the other eye. I'm just taking it on this outer corner as well and connecting it a little bit underneath my lower lash line. And I'm using the mini booster from Sonia G. Up Daylily, and I'm just going to deepen this up on the outer corner right here and take it a little bit underneath their lower lash line as well, just to connect the two. And we're just going to keep it right here and not take it any further out, and I'm going to pick up just a tiny bit of that shade on the Sonia G as well and just really start to blend that outwards. And really want to keep it controlled. And that blended out so nicely, and it gave really good depth. So now for the shimmer, I think I'm going to use my finger, and then on the other side I'll use some sort of a tacky primer. Picked up Rust Bunny, which is such a funny name. Oh, that is so pretty. It has a bunch of different flecks throughout it. That is so pretty. Oh, I love that. Okay, and then on the inner corner, kind of like swooping down, I'm going to use yellow Bronwyn. And that's just going to go like right up, swoop up. If it gets a little messy, that's fine. I really am into messier eye looks. Anyway, I just feel like I like the way it just looks a little bit more worn and kind of like melted together. So here's what that looks like. So pretty. Here's our first finished look. For the second look, I prime with the P. Louise Paint Primer, and I'm picking up Green Kelly on a T63 brush from the Makeup Shack. And this looks, I have to say, this looks a lot lighter than in the pan, so let me just kind of keep packing it on. Okay, I'm getting a little bit more depth, but I just feel like it looks way darker. I'm kind of putting it on an angle all the way down, but not quite creating like an eyeshadow wing like usually. And I'm just gonna take that a little bit by little and just blend out whatever is on my lid. Not dipping back into the pan or anything. And just taking and blending, blending, blending. I'm going to go in with a little bit more just over here. I'm going to also connect it to the lower lash line. And I think that's pretty good, but again, it's not as deep as it looks in the pan. So I'm just going to pack on a little bit more. And I think this is dark as I'm going to get it. Putting down a little bit of the Specular eyeshadow primer, shimmer primer from Devinah. And I'm just going to put that up into my crease here and then a little bit onto this half of my lid. And I'm picking up Blue Crown. And it's going to go right out here. And a little bit further out into the outer corner as well. Ooh, that is so pretty together. And then I picked up Daffodil, and that's gonna go right in here. Right above it. And I'm just kind of blending out the edges. And then meshing them together. And then I'm just gonna go over the outer corner here. Just to make sure everything is nice and blended. Here's a second finished look. So first I want to talk about the shimmers because I'm so excited. These are the kinds of shimmers that just apply so easily with a finger, with a brush, especially like a flat brush, even a little toothier brush, like you can just mist it. Or if you want something just a very light ethereal kind of sparkle, then I think you could definitely get there with some of the shades, specifically the lighter, more sheer shades. But if you want them to be a little bit more opaque, spraying the brush and using some sort of a tacky primer of your choice. So I used 4 of the shimmers, but I also did swatches. I have Swatches palette, I've touched it. So based on that, I think the formulas in here are pretty cohesive. So I think they're all going to apply very, very nicely. Dahlia is really the only kind of outlier in here because it is that very, very smooth kind of multichrome. So think a little bit more like the kind of black base multichromes, but obviously it doesn't have a black base, but it's like smooth and metallic in that way versus some of these other shades have just a little bit extra sparkle to them versus like being like liquid metallic, if that makes any sense. Hopefully making sense. So loving the shimmers in here. I do kind of wish that Scorpion Grass was maybe not tie-dye. It looks cool in the palette. It's a little bit intriguing. It makes you want to like swatch it and see what the shade looks like. But I feel like usually with these kinds of shades, it does end up just kind of blending together and making a neutral shade. So I don't really feel like it needed to be in here. I definitely wish it had been maybe like a iridescent topper or something like that. But otherwise, loving the shimmers in here. Let's talk about the mattes, and I feel like the mattes in here are going to blend differently on different eyeshadow primers. I could just tell from using Tan Toffee Rose on the Pat McGrath primer versus using Green Kelly on the P. Louise primer that there's just a little bit of difference on how these mattes lay down, and I definitely feel like they can stick down a little bit and you have to kind of work to blend them out a little bit extra. So I do want to test out the matte some more and I'll keep you updated on my thoughts. Also wanted to mention Green Kelly really does not swatch well at all, which doesn't matter as long as it applies, and it blended out really nicely, though I do feel like it's not as dark on the lid as it is in here. Maybe there's just a little bit of more finessing that I need to try out next time I use a shade, but Daylily, beautiful, blended effortlessly, layered on effortlessly. I have to try Sahara, so I'll keep you updated on my thoughts, but so far I'm really enjoying the palette and I can't wait to create some looks with it this week. Also on the cheeks and the lips, I'm wearing the Lavish Lip and Cheek Flush from Glam Cosmetics, and I also am wearing the shade Gem Hadar, which is this one right here from the Cutresol White face palette. I absolutely love this formula. I need more of these. Like I need a whole palette of just more of this formula and more like shifty multi-chrome kind of shades. So please, Adept, if you're watching. So let me know in the comments below which look was your favorite, if you picked this palette up or if you plan on picking it up. I would love to hear your thoughts. And that's everything for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.